Have you ever experienced something so crippling in your life that has made you feel broken? I have. Are you someone who has a giving heart but is struggling to feel good themselves? Are you consistently putting your needs aside to take care of everyone else? If so, you're not alone. Giving starts with giving to yourself so that you are able to give of yourself to other people. Isn't it time you took back control and discovered what makes you tick? Join me in my journey and find out how you can feel better about yourself, live your best life, and share that with others. Thinking of yourself, it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you brave. I'm Nelia, and this is the Giving Starts With You podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Giving Starts With You podcast. I'm your host, Nelia Hutt. And today we've got a very important topic that we're going to be talking about. I mean, all of our topics are pretty amazing and pretty important. But today, especially, if you have any teenagers at home, if you have any young adults, if you have friends who have, invite them to listen to the show today. Many times we talk about things that are, how do we say this, are difficult. And sometimes those are the most impactful conversations to have. And this show is made to be a safe space for those conversations. So today I have a new online friend who I've just met, who's amazing. Her name is Dee Dee Said. She is here from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited to be here this morning.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. And, I know how busy we are. And the fact that you've taken your morning here and you've come on to share your wisdom and your experiences with us is amazing. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to let you guys know who Dee Dee Said is, a little bit about her. So, Dee Dee, she has worked for a national nonprofit for the last 20 years and has also started a local nonprofit to help area youth and families. We're all about giving here, so I love this so much. She is a proud mom of two young adults. She also is the author of It Doesn't Start With a Punch: My Journey Through an Abusive Teen Dating Relationship. She wrote the book to help others understand how abusive relationships start subtly and grow. She talks about the warning signs of unhealthy relationships as well as how to help other people in the same situation. She has started Building Strong Foundations. I absolutely love that name. It tells a point, it tells you what it's about. I love it so much. And she wants to talk today about identifying signs of unhealthy and harmful relationships and why we need to do that. We have all known someone or have been ourselves in a harmful and unhealthy relationship. And sometimes we don't know what to look for. Sometimes we don't know how to get out. Sometimes we don't have the power to stop those conversations, those relationships. So I'm really happy that Dee Dee is here today to talk to us. She's also going to explain a little bit, share a little bit about her personal story and how she got into this in the first place. So welcome. I'm so happy you're here. Heavy topic today.
A little bit of a heavy topic, yes. But good. If people are aware, then other people can prevent it or avoid it.
Absolutely. And so important. So much of our life is the relationships we find ourselves in and how we thrive and how we live our lives and how happy we are really ultimately comes down to our relationships, whether it's with our parents, our friends, our boyfriends and girlfriends. Yeah. So Dee Dee, on a human level, who are you, hon?
So, like you said, Dee Dee Said, is from San Antonio, Texas, right now. Um, as a teenager, my dad was an officer in the Air Force. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. I was involved in, played on the school tennis team, National Honor Society, school youth group. Kept my kids involved in activities as they were growing up, and being involved in church is pretty important to me.
That's awesome. So how did this all start? So you were a teenager. And
Yes.
yeah, and I'm understanding from your book, like the title of your book is so powerful. So can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
your journey?
Sure. So I think so going back to the title of the book, I think so often we see the news story. We see the worst of an abusive relationship and we wonder, why on earth were they in that? But we don't stop to think about how it started or how they got there. So when I was 16, I was the only one of my friends that had yet to really date anybody and or even really know that a boy liked me. And so one afternoon after school, a friend asked for a ride home, and a friend of his jumped in the car. And we flirted a little bit on the way home and exchanged phone numbers and started talking on the phone. And after a few weeks, he asked me out on a date, and it was great. At 16, it was everything I hoped for. He picked me up at the front door, walked me to the car. We had a great dinner out, walked me back to the front door. And so we pretty quickly evolved into a dating boyfriend girlfriend relationship. And it was good. We went out with friends. He took us, my friends and I, to a haunted house. We went on some double dates, but there was another side that wasn't as nice. And it didn't start with the physical violence. It was like one day he told me a lie. And I called him, and it was a pretty big lie. And I called him out on it. And he said, well, can't you just take a joke? I was only joking with it. And I remember really debating, like I didn't like being lied to that way, but he was telling me it was supposed to be something funny. And I didn't know if it was really something worth breaking up over. And so I stayed in the relationship. And then it started being put downs and derogatory comments. At first, it was addressed towards my family and friends. He would make fun of them in various ways, put them down. And so I started pulling away from them, not wanting him to think poorly of me for the people I associated with. And they were all great people. There was nothing wrong with them. They were great people. His was the loudest voice in my head at that time. And then the derogatory comments turned towards me. So I played tennis and it was, well, you're not very coordinated, that no wonder you aren't ranked higher on the team. And he told me that I wasn't very smart. When I pointed out that I was enrolled in harder classes than he was, he said, well, but you've got book smart. You don't have real world smart. You're not going to be able to survive out of high school. And, so it was things like that. And I always spoke back to it, but he came back just as much. And so I learned to doubt myself. And recently I realized like those are comments that you don't take and share with somebody else. Like I wouldn't go and say, hey, he said I'm not coordinated. What do you think of this? Am I, because that's
Right.
embarrassing, you know?
Right.
So, and it's somebody that you care about is saying this about you. So you internalize it and it affects your self-esteem.
Yeah. Um, when you were talking about how he was saying things about your family, I wasn't sure what you were going to say next because I was like, okay, is she already pulling away and going with her family? But you did what is most common. You pulled away from your family because this is a new relationship. It makes you feel good at the time. You want it to grow. You don't want to jeopardize it. It's what most people do, right? They believe what
Right.
they're being told. And yeah, I can see how it can shake your self-confidence. I'm thinking because my son is 16 and I'm thinking of how he thinks and how much we put into the relationships we have, especially at that age. And I think you did what most people do, right? You
Right.
just stay with it. Your gut is telling you this doesn't feel good, but then you're kind of being convinced it's normal.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and then when you think about the school hallways and the conversations that you
Mm.
hear there, especially today, derogatory language and sarcasm is common. And so it doesn't really stand out as being abnormal or being bad because you're used to it, even from television shows and movies and different things. So, but when it's pointed at you and especially from somebody that you care about, it doesn't feel good, but you don't understand it, especially at that young age.
Mhm. So what happened next?
So I stayed in the relationship and I think I honestly don't remember if it was physical or sexual that started next, but I think that it was the sexual pressure that started pretty quickly. and it was relentless of always wanting to go more than I was comfortable with. And I just didn't have the words. Like I hesitated and I stopped and I would pull back, but I didn't, and I would say I this isn't what I want to do now. I I think one of the things though was I had seen it so much in the movies. Like in church I had
Mhm.
heard you don't do this, but in the movies and in television shows it was happening. Conversation in the hallways, it was happening. So I was really confused. Like I wanted to wait, but I didn't necessarily know how to. There was all these other influence around me. And so after several months, I gave into it. And I talk about this one because a counselor has told me that it's really important that this happens to a lot of girls. You
Mhm.
want to wait, you have sex with somebody, so you make up your mind this is who you're going to marry. You're staying with this person. So I made that choice very early in the relationship when it was verbal and emotional abuse at the time, and I never stopped to think of, hey, there might be somebody else out here that's not going to pressure me sexually. Maybe this isn't the right relationship. Like to me, I'd seen this is what dating looked like from television and movies. I just assumed that it was normal, and instead of saying, hey, this isn't for me. So I made up my mind to stay in the relationship. And then after that, the physical abuse started. And it was one day we were in the hallway talking with a friend of his after school. There wasn't really many other people. I don't remember anybody being around except the three of us. And we weren't heated about anything. We were just all talking and debating on something and trying to look cool in front of his friend. As I made a comment, I, kind of did a backhanded tap on his shoulder, and he turned around and with both hands pushed me into my chest, and hard enough that I stumbled, fell backwards, slid, dropped all my books, and I was humiliated. I was like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And I'm embarrassed. My books are all over the floor. So I'm picking things up. And in the meantime, like all these warning bells are going off in my mind, but I was quick to deny them, to make excuses for them. It was, well, it can't be what I thought that was. And then it was, he wouldn't have done something like that in front of somebody else. And then I thought I was, 100 pounds, 5'6". He was close to right around 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. I thought, well, maybe he didn't mean to do that as hard as he did. And that's actually, denial is one of the first layers of getting into an abusive relationship. I think there's four of them, but that's the first one. And so between making up that decision and then denying it and not saying anything to somebody when that happened, I it was my normal.
And I think it's a lot of people's normal. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt. We want to believe that the people who we let into our lives are going to look after us. And I think
Right.
that's a normal feeling that human beings have. We don't, we do trust easily. And um, I don't know, people that are listening right now, I'm sure that you have had, whether it's in a marriage or even through a friendship, where sometimes people do something to you and you either blame yourself or you try to ignore the fact that it happened or play it down. We do it all the time. But in certain circumstances, it can become really dangerous. And not only, like you said, it affects your self-confidence, it affects what you think of about yourself. And then you blame yourself. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I stand up for myself? All of those things. But in the moment, we all have this part of ourselves where we just want to trust and believe people are good, right? So
Right.
it's very common that people stay and don't and react the way that you did. Like as a teenager, when you did end the relationship, did you have those thoughts of why didn't I do this sooner? Or did you have the thoughts of did I make the wrong, did should I have stayed with that person regardless? Like how did you feel after? Because we are very hard on ourselves.
At the time that I broke up, I didn't, it had never crossed my mind to leave until I left. And so I didn't look back on it and second guess anything. I just knew I wanted to move forward. And so to me, I slammed the door on that relationship, and I'd been very isolated and very sheltered in that. I mean, he had stricter rules on me than my parents did as a teenager. So, I had been isolated from friends. I'd been sheltered, and I was 19 when I ended the relationship. So stayed in it for 3 years. And I just wanted to get on with the things that I felt like I had missed out on. And so I, jumped into college life and making new friends and um, finding a new boyfriend. And those are, that's where it's really important to find the time to heal, though, where everybody else had been making decisions for themselves and figuring out who they were and what they liked and what was important and what they wanted to be involved in. I'd had somebody else telling me what to be involved in or to do, and really not being involved in anything, just being around him or babysitting. I babysat to stay out of social situations.
But that was very mature of you at that age, because 3 years is a long time, and those teenage years are very important about, finding out who you are. And when you're in a relationship like that, you tell me if I'm wrong, but when you're in a relationship like that, you really do get confused about, who you are, or maybe you're not able to explore that because there's these chains around you. So I think it was very mature of you to deal with it in the way that you did. And imagine if you didn't have the courage to do that, where would you be now? You don't know what would have happened. Things
Right.
could have turned even more dangerous. Things could have changed, and maybe you guys would have gotten married. We just don't know. And it's just to show us that we need to trust our instincts, our gut feelings. We just did a show on trusting your instinct and how people don't do that and why they don't do that. And it's because we all want to be loved, we all want to be accepted. And these things happen all the time. We're talking here about how, in your situation, it was a boy who did that to you. But I'm seeing more and more that girls are being very aggressive.
I've heard that from a lot of parents with boys.
Very
Yes.
aggressive. And as a mother of a teenage boy, I don't ever want my son to put somebody in a position that they are uncomfortable and have to change who they are. But man, I'm going to be right there in his corner if a girl comes along. And it's like, you've got to be careful, because everybody blames the boy. And in most cases, let's face it, it is the boy, but I think it's becoming more and more where it's both sexes. And I think people need to realize that, because there's not one person at fault. There's personalities, whether you're a boy or a girl, there's lots of different things. And, those conversations in the hallways at high schools, a lot of them aren't real. A lot of them aren't true. People sometimes lie about having sex with each other and lie about this, where in reality, boys are just as scared as girls are, and girls are just as scared as boys are at the end of the day in high school. There's a lot going on. So it's tough, but I really want to say thank you for you sharing your story, because I think in sharing your story, people are going to know where you're coming from and why this is important to you, and are going to listen to you more because you've been through it. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
love that you now help youth figure this out, and you give them a safe space. And I think we're all looking for those people who believe that what we're telling is true.
Right. Yes. No, and
So,
that's a key thing in this is listening and respecting when the person wants to open up.
did you have anybody to talk to when this was happening to you, or did you just keep it to yourself?
I completely kept it to myself. My parents guessed what was going on and they tried to approach me about it and talk about it. And I got very defensive and pulled away, and they said anytime they tried to pull me into a conversation about it, I would actually run closer to my
And that's
boyfriend
a
at the time.
sign. I think
Yes.
that's a sign. The last people I wanted to talk to when I was a teenager, and I had my things as a teenager, was my parents. And sometimes you want to talk to your friends, but it's like, are they going to laugh at me? Are they going to think I'm weird because they're having sex? Or they were, all of these things. And it's hard. It's hard because you believe that people will laugh, people won't understand. And so where do you go? Where do you turn? So I love that we're having this conversation, because we're going to be teaching, and you're going to be talking to us about the warning signs and what you can do if you know someone in this relationship, or maybe as an adult you're in a marriage like this too. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily, we're not just talking about being a teenager, but it's about not letting people take your power away. And this is part of giving starts with you. You know, we were talking before we hit record about how I feel that, and you agreed that self-care is not just about bubble baths. It's about priorities and boundaries and loving yourself enough to trust yourself and getting away from toxic people. So I know we're going to talk about that. And like I said, you know, share this with other people because I think you're really going to learn something. So Dee Dee, I have a question. When you ended things, what was his reaction? Because I'm thinking, before you answer that, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be either, I don't know that the person would take responsibility, but I have a feeling that a lot of times things end and they're like, and the boys or the girls, whoever's on the abusive end of it, will say something like, "Oh, well, you're just taking things too seriously, and I wasn't doing all those things." Like, was it a big denial on his part, or did he actually apologize and understand? Because you want people to heal. You want the perpetrator to also learn something.
Right. So I think I can, let me give a two-part to that. So anytime the abuse happened, he was always very remorseful afterwards, would pull me into his lap and he was sorry and he loved me so much. And, you know, if he didn't care about me so much, that wouldn't have happened. And he would go on. So it was kind of this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You know, he was this wonderful person when he wasn't abusive. As far as when I ended things, I honestly don't remember what he said. I know that it probably, well, one, I should say I was not safe in what I did, and I wish I'd known this information back then. It's really important not to be alone with somebody, because somebody that has been abusive or manipulative, to them, the relationship has a control factor in it. And when the other person is breaking up or leaving, they've lost control. And so often that's when the abuse or the violence will escalate. So it's really important to have a safety plan in place when you're dating that person, if you decide to stay in it for a while, but also when you decide to leave, you really need a safety plan. So I went to his house. I was in his bedroom behind a closed door. I remember the conversation being like an hour, hour and a half long. I don't think that I told anybody I was going over there to break up with him. It had probably taken me 3 months to decide to. There was an incident that helped me see things differently. It was planned rather than what I'd always believed was a reaction to something. And so I sat on that and thought and pondered, and after 3 months decided to break up. And what I do remember is he told me that he saw confidence in me that he'd never seen before. I was kind of like, I never hit him, but I was bold in my speaking that night when I hadn't been before. And when I left, I went and spent the night with my best friend, and I told her a little bit, but just high level details. I didn't talk to my parents about it for 20 years.
Mm, wow. Bravery, right? But one of the
Yes,
best things that you've done. And I'm so glad that you said let people know what you're doing, even if you don't tell them the details, because you hear about these things on the news. You hear about um this person's ex killed
right,
them. This person's, sometimes it happens after the breakup. A lot of times it happens after the breakup because people get angry.
right. He
Mhm.
called me 6 months maybe after we'd broken up, and I don't remember if he'd been drinking, but he was really distraught and he kept wanting me to agree to see him that night.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't. I don't remember how long the phone call was. It was over an hour long. And the only way I finally got off the phone with him was to agree to meet him. And he kept on the phone call, he kept wanting to harm himself if I wouldn't meet him. And he kept talking about the gun, and there was somebody else with him. I don't remember who it was, but I called his parents the next day and I said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is what happened last night. And they said that they had just gotten a rifle away from him before
Oh
he
wow.
decided to call me. So it was true. I Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's the violence is there.
Hmm. And your book, the title, it doesn't start with a punch. It's true. I think a lot of us, we just believe maybe because our parents were in that situation or whatever it is, people tend to talk more about physical, I think, abuse than mental and emotional abuse because it's more commonly talked about, right? So it doesn't have to start with a punch. It does start with, it can start with demeaning comments and just lowering people's self-esteem. Because if you don't believe in yourself, but you believe in this person, of course you're going to, it'd be easier to stay, right? So
Right.
you talked about some of the warning signs like isolation and how he took um, your relationship away from other relationships, right? So, what are some of the other signs that we can look for in relationship, especially as a teenager, but even as an adult?
Right. So somebody in the relationship can look for, like we just said, the derogatory comments, but also like wanting more of that person's time. Like you need a healthy balance of time with your other friendships, with the activities you were involved in before this relationship came along. So if they're pulling and wanting more of your time, it's not necessarily healthy. Um, from the outside, seeing somebody that was involved in a lot of things and now they're not, or maybe they were outgoing and now they're withdrawn. They used to have a lot of friends around. Now they're just either by themselves or with this person. Being sullen or having anxiety where maybe you didn't, depression comes along. I called it despair at the time. You might cry for no reason, either alone or in front of other people. They might not understand what they're crying about. Um, Wearing the wrong clothes for the season, like it's summertime and
Oh,
they've got on a long sleeve short, or they start wearing longer pants. Maybe they used to dress trendy and now they dress conservative. So changes that way. Being very secretive. I became a master at lying. My parents didn't want me spending a lot of time with him, or I would make up excuses about other things. But technology, especially today, like the abuser might have the password to that person's phone so they can monitor their text messages or their social media accounts. They probably likely want to have tabs on them pretty frequently. Back in my day, it was the landline. So if I went to the mall, that wasn't an option. But now, they want to be able, they expect you to be able to answer. So grounding somebody or restricting them from phone use and seeing a heightened reaction can be a sign as well.
and the tracking apps, people
Yes.
always know where you are. It's
Yes.
scary,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
scary. So it all sounds very difficult to get out of. Do you have
It
any suggestions of how do people or what should people be asking themselves if they're not sure if they should leave those, like if you're not trusting your instinct and you're just not sure if this is real, like is this really happening to me, am I just making up too much, if am I putting too much emphasis on this joke that doesn't feel right, or you know what's a good thing to maybe help people move beyond that or to trust themselves?
yeah. So I'd say one, thinking about how you feel in the relationship. Are you truly happy? Are you truly content? Are you anxious? Are you not yourself? Are your grades changing? Are you not thinking as well in activities? So kind of thinking about yourself before and after the relationship. And I think you'll see a difference there. But then, and it is hard to recognize when you're in the middle of it. So I think too, people from the outside speaking in, like my friends, they knew something wasn't right. I don't know that they knew what, but they knew I was different. And so when they tried to approach me about it, the same thing as my parents, I lashed out at them and kind of pushed them away verbally and kept myself isolated. And so they have been shamed, and the person being abused has been shamed and guilted. And so somebody from the outside to come and just speak into them and say, you're valuable, you're important to me, you matter, these are the great things that I see about you, building them up where they've been torn down,
Mm.
working to establish some trust. I mean, this is a person you probably have known for a long time, but they're confused. And I always equate it to being like in the fun house with the uneven floor and you can't get your balance.
Yeah.
That's what an abusive relationship is. Like, you try, but every time you take a step, it tilts or it changes. And so you try again. And so having somebody, and it might take several times of speaking in and being affirming that way, and then just saying, hey, once you've kind of established or built that trust up a little bit, saying, hey, it seems like some things are off and I care about you. And is there anything that you want to talk about or anything that I can help you with? And maybe they'll start to share a little bit. And like I said in the beginning, like, it's, if somebody says a harmful comment to you, it's really hard to say, hey, somebody said this about me, and I don't know if this is right. I don't know what I should think about this. Like, those words are hard to get out of your mouth. It's hard to share that thought with somebody else. So
Mhm.
they're going to take baby steps in talking about it. And it might be a while before you know the extent of the abuse, but just keep listening and affirming, be patient. Um, don't talk more than you listen, because they need space to open up. And like I said, maybe it's a little bit at a time. Maybe hand them a flyer that has the warning signs to be looking for, or point them to a website that has Love is Respect is a great website that has quizzes that teens can take that help
Okay.
them know if their relationship is healthy or not.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I know
Mhm.
on your website, people can also get a very helpful printout of warning signs, subtle things to recognize, subtle things to learn. And it's important, sometimes teenagers shut parents down. They're like, well, I don't want to talk about this, even before this relationship happens. Um, but it's a great informative sheet that you've created that you can just even hand to someone, even if they don't want to talk about it. So we'll definitely let you guys know where you can get that. But compromise, what about when someone is just the only one that's making a compromise? I know you talk about that as well. And if you're giving up all the things that you love and this other person is not having any compromises, that's pretty much a red flag too. Even in a marriage as an adult, this is across the board.
Right. Not valuing your beliefs and your
Mm,
values or your thoughts is another one too.
interesting. So I know we're both moms of teenagers, and I think as I'm listening to what you're talking about and how hard it is once you're in that relationship to actually change things without
Hmm.
feeling so scared that you're stuck or that you're frozen. What can we do as parents for our kids before they become teenagers so that they love themselves enough, they're firm in what they believe in, so that they're not as easily maybe deterred from their own beliefs? Like, is there anything that you can think of that we can help our kids really? And I think the new generations are like, I think that that's happening because more of the kids are saying, yeah, this isn't right. They're standing up for themselves. They're learning about their sexuality earlier. They're respecting themselves. But is there anything as parents, I'm just trying to think myself too, um, what can we do to prepare our kids before they start these relationships so that they're secure?
I think it starts when they're young. It starts when they're first friendships and helping them think through. We tend to say, "Oh, was that person nice to you?" or "How was school today?" And we don't always dig into what the relationships are like. And so helping them see what's healthy and unhealthy in relationships when they're young. I had all of the protective factors around me, and I still got involved in one
Mhm.
of these. But the other thing that I did with my kids as they were growing up, because I knew how much I had learned from movies and TV. So
Yeah.
one, I tried to steer them towards shows with healthy things. Like, I miss Full House, the original one. you
Yes.
know, it was always 30 minutes of a lesson packed in. Here's the issue, here's the dad talk at the end. It was great. So we watched a lot of those. But but movies are fun, and so I would sit next to my daughter on the couch, and like Top Gun is one. Like I still love that movie, but he goes after the girl. They have an exchange. He comes over hot and sweaty and not showered. Like that's not respectful for a date, right? Then their next episode, it says she's falling for him, and I'm like, there's nothing, you don't know enough about this person yet to fall for them, so anyway, she can roll her eyes and say what I would say in a movie now, but I hope it helped point out to her that you don't fall in love in 2 weeks. You don't fall in love because he's cute. There has to be substance to that
Mm.
relationship. And so, and just as much as we watch the fun ones with, these kind of things that we would joke about, I also showed her some really good movies. Like I love the series Love Comes Softly. It's
Oh, I
an
haven't
old
seen that.
fashioned, yeah, I think
Okay.
Hallmark put it out, and it's an old fashioned, set in the old west is being developed kind of time frame, but they're all healthy, respectful. They grow by working together kind of relationships. And so anyways, I tried to show her movies like that, or
Yeah,
Apollo 13, where there's
I
perseverance
love
and
it.
teamwork. And yeah,
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love that you said, you could have had the most perfect childhood. You could be one of the strongest individuals. It can still happen. And
right,
it's to no fault of your own. It is a growing process. And a lot of people find themselves in this situation. So
right.
I think we've learned a lot today, but I also want, you know, you were talking about how depression and anxiety is a sign. Do you also think that it could be the other way? There could be a really shy person who becomes very outgoing and very like the opposite side. It probably doesn't happen as often as somebody who is extroverted becoming more introverted. But in your experience, because I know you deal with a lot of teenagers, have you ever seen it the other way, where they become more promiscuous? They become more in the way that they dress or the
Oh,
way that they talk and their language just to fit in so that people, as a hiding mechanism, so people don't see that maybe they're different or that they're in this situation.
if there's verbal, emotional, and physical abuse, I don't think so, because that person tends to be really jealous, which is also a sign. And this is one is very misunderstood, especially by teens. Like, when you're first in a dating relationship and you want this person to like you and you want them to be enamored with you, like it can seem like a big compliment that they're jealous, that that they
Right,
don't want you
right.
with other people. And so that is a huge, huge sign. But because of that jealousy, and it tends to be extreme jealousy, you're probably not going to do anything outgoing because you don't want to draw attention to yourself, because then that brings on the abuse. But I have heard that teens that are abused sexually, sometimes they become promiscuous as a side effect afterwards. So
Mm.
that certainly, yeah, dressing differently, and we're so misguided in that. I look back to J Lo, what, 30 years ago, when she first wore the plunging neckline,
Right.
dress to the Grammys or whatever the event was. And now that dress is it, we were aghast that a dress like
It
that
was
came out.
shocking. Yeah, at the
Right.
time.
It was. And it was like, oh my gosh, you're showing so much of your body, and that's not right. And now it's in high school prom dresses, so things have changed. But that's, so what girls see of that is that's how you get attention. They don't realize that the movie star is having to do that to keep her ratings up, to keep the job offer coming. But
Mm.
it's not how we want to attract a person. And we're not going to attract a quality person if they're only looking at us for what's on the outside, or what we're wearing, or how much we're revealing.
See, yeah, I do agree with you, but a part of me, like when I see girls in this age, wearing these maybe what people would say are inappropriate to get attention, I sometimes hope in my mind that it's not for that reason. I sometimes hope this is great. They feel confident about who they are. They, I don't necessarily think it's for attention. Sometimes I just think that, or I hope that it's because they are confident in their bodies, that they are confident in who they are, and that they have those boundaries up. Because I don't want people to think that, um, how do I say this without it being awkward? So, this is why this is important to have these conversations. But back in the day, like I'm 50 now, but back in the day, a lot of times guys would say, well, if she didn't want it, she wouldn't dress like that. And that freaks me out. And it's so hard to hear because back then, as a teenager, I remembered that and I believed that. And now, as a grown woman, I hope that boys and girls, because I think of them still as boys and girls at that age, that they don't think that way. I'm hoping that boys don't think, oh, if a girl's wearing that, it's an automatic, yes, they want to have sex with me. Do you know what I mean? I'm
Yes.
hoping they look at it as this is a confident woman who is not going to put up with anything, who's comfortable with who she is. And I'm hoping it's going that way. But you just, the problem here is that you will never know what the other person is thinking. You don't know what
Right.
their beliefs are. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know if that person across from you is thinking, oh my God, she wants to have sex with me, or she's a confident person. So you do have to be aware. But at the end of the day, you should be able to dress the way that you want to dress. So I do see both sides.
Yes.
I do see both sides. It is tough, isn't it?
It is. It is. Well, and with so many messages too.
Yeah,
I mean, just in society and in general.
yeah. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you think will be helpful for people, even if it's not them in the relationship? Let's say they know somebody or they see some warning signs. How can they help that person if that person doesn't want to admit what's happening, but you just kind of sense there's something there?
Yeah, like I said, I think the best thing is to try to build trust and to
Mm,
continue to be there and let that person know that you're there, just in general even. Um, but I think the other thing that we didn't touch on is, and this was staggering to me as I did the research for the book. So we tend to think that somebody that's abusive learns it in their home. Maybe they watch a parent be abusive with another one. They were the victim of abuse from a parent or a sibling. We tend to think that's where it comes from, but for decades now, the medical community has actually been finding that somebody that is abusive learns it as much from the society around them. Maybe there's a role model that they look up to. So, I mean, we hear rumors on sports teams of it happening, but also video games. A child that learns violence through a video game learns that aggression is the way to solve problems. Then it's in songs, it's in movies, TV. So just recognizing that there's a lot of influence and messages that lead into exactly what you're saying. We don't know what the other person is thinking or
mm.
where their thoughts and ideas are coming from. And so just recognizing that they're getting a lot of signs and we just need to affirm and keep talking about positive character traits to build healthy relationships.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Thank you for bringing that up because I don't necessarily like I agree with you, but I don't necessarily believe that if you watch these things that it's automatic. But
Right.
you're right. Like I think we need to have the conversation. And that's why it's important to get to know anybody
Yeah.
beforehand. Have those questions. Find out what people's beliefs are and all of those things because maybe before you get to the abusive part in that relationship, you already have an out if you see that you are too different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard. Life is hard. And being a teenager, it was, yeah, I was so confused as a teenager. And I don't know that I would have gone to anybody, but as an adult, I can see so many people I probably could have reached out to.
Yeah.
We just want to fit in. And sometimes it's important. I want people to know that it's important to stand out. Sometimes when you try to follow everybody else, it's not the best choice for you. It's not the best thing to do. And being normal is kind of boring. Like, be your own quirky self and stand up for yourself. And, I don't know. I think there's so many things out there now for teens and for adults to participate in that teach you this stuff, like whether it's workshops or just team building exercises. And there's so many things out there. And yeah, I feel good about the new generation where they're talking about things more and they're not putting up with um, things as much. But I think we would all be very, very surprised as to how much it still happens in schools, whether people are talking about it or not. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's a lot to think about. It really is, but just go with your gut. I mean,
I agree. That's the most important thing. Go with your gut. Well, and we didn't touch on this, but it's
yes.
actually 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 10 boys will be in an abusive relationship between the ages of 16 and 24. And in the 10 years that I've been pulling the research, that hasn't changed.
Wow. I
So,
saw that statistic on your website. I was looking through, I was very intrigued in reading everything that you had there. And very high.
yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful for shows like this that we get to raise awareness and
Mhm.
people get to learn what the warning signs are and how to help because this is going to go a long way to help people avoid these relationships or get out of them before they really turn harmful.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that some people know that the isolation one is big. Like people do know that in their minds, but they don't necessarily let it change their decision, right? So, for example, people will listen to this today and they might say, "Oh, yeah, no, I heard about that before. I heard about, if people are trying to control you, then it might be a sign." But they don't really take it any further because it is scary. It
Hmm.
is scary. And one of the things one of my missions for this show is to end loneliness. And even if all people get out of this is that this happens way too much, which means it's horrible. But it also means that people get it, people understand, and there are more people that you can share this with than you may feel like you can. And a lot of people have gone through relationships that are like this. There are a lot of people who don't know how to be in a relationship. There are a lot of men and women that need to be taught how to be in a healthy relationship. I'm looking at the other side too, not just the victim or the person that's being abused, but the other person. We want to help both sides because nobody wants a teenage boy who is doing these things to a girl to grow up and be this abusive husband, to want to be this husband, father. And so we want to help both sides. I know we tend to try to help people more that are being the victim in it, but I think it's important to think of both people as well,
Yes,
so
I
that
agree.
we can help and teach them so that this doesn't even become a thing, so it doesn't even start, so people don't think they can get away with doing this to other people. But
Right.
yeah, but Dee Dee and I just want you guys to know you're not alone. So the more you feel that you're not alone, the more options I hope that you feel that you have, even if it's not just reaching out to people, but just for yourself. Don't feel like you're not good enough. Don't feel that you're not perfect enough and all of these things, because honestly, at the end of the day, anybody can find fault with anybody,
Yes. Yep.
you know,
We're all flawed, just working to get better.
and don't believe everything you hear, right? When
Right.
people tell you
Absolutely.
something, if you feel that that's not you, you got to pay attention, right?
That was the biggest thing for me is that I even because this happened to me, I felt like it was my fault. I carried shame and I carried guilt and I felt dinged because of it. And I heard a Sunday school class anyways, and it was, God saying this doesn't change who you are. You're still worthy and I still love you. And that changed me. It took away that, oh yeah, I'm still me in the middle. And so that's what I want everybody to know is each and every person has value and has worth regardless of what's happened or mistakes that you've made. Every person has value and worth, and the best we can do is just keep moving forward to be in healthy relationships.
Yes, Dee Dee, I love that so much. In my trailer, I talk about sometimes things happen to us that we think will break us.
Yes.
And I want people to know this isn't going to break you, even if you're
Right.
in a relationship right now, and I hope this has given you the confidence that you need to get out of it. So, Dee Dee, I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I know it's
Me
kind of
too.
heavy, and we're laughing about it now, and I know it's heavy, but life is heavy and we have to we have to talk about, not all the time. We can talk about
Right.
light stuff too. And that brings me to my next thing. I would love to invite you back on the show to talk about giving, because I know you're in the nonprofit world and you've worked in nonprofit and you probably have remarkable stories and things that you can share with us. So I would love to have you back someday.
I would love to be back. Thank you so much.
That's great. Well, continue doing this important work. It is changing lives, and I really want people to go to your website. Tell us how we can reach you.
So the website is buildstrongfoundations.com, and it's full of a bunch of resources of what healthy relationships look like, the warning signs to look for. There's a tab that is resources, organizations that can help, that have chat lines where teens can ask questions and get answers right away confidentially.
And where can people find your book? Let's read
So
this book.
yes, thank you very much. The book is on Amazon, and it's called "It Doesn't Start with a Punch," and my journey through a teen dating relationship, abusive teen dating relationship.
I love that. I honestly love that. And yeah, keep raising awareness and keep raising these kids, to be the best that they can be, as I'm sure you are already. And I've learned a few things that I can maybe think about when I deal with my own child and my own teenager and young adult and the things that he's going through. And I really appreciate that on a personal level as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I enjoyed the time this morning, and I'm really grateful to be able to raise awareness and reach more people with the message.
Yeah, let's raise some confident people.
Yes,
And
yes.
yeah, thank you so much, guys. And please share this message. Honestly, it's not because of ratings or listening. We really want to help people on this show. And the more people that you can share it with, you just don't know how you're going to change somebody's life. And they're all worth improving.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe or leave a review. See you next week on the Giving Starts With You podcast.